The hotel charge hit my phone at 11:47 p.m. while I was sitting in my truck outside our house, watching Elise through the kitchen window. She was pacing, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly like she always did when she was lying to someone important. $237 at the Meridian downtown, room service for two, premium wine, the works. My name's Nick Foster, and I've been married to that woman for 12 years. 12 years of building a construction business from nothing, of working 16-hour days so she could chase her marketing dreams, of believing her when she said those late nights at the office were about climbing the corporate ladder. The funny thing about being underestimated your whole life is that people forget you're paying attention. They think because you swing a hammer for a living, you can't read between the lines. They think because you don't wear a suit to work, you don't understand how the game is played. They're wrong. I sat there in my F-150, engine ticking as it cooled, and scrolled through 3 months of credit card statements on my phone. The pattern was beautiful in its stupidity. Every Tuesday and Thursday, her late meeting days, there were charges. Restaurants I'd never been to, hotels I'd never seen, florists, lingerie shops, even a jewelry store last week. The front door opened and Elise stepped onto the porch, still talking. In the yellow glow of the porch light, I could see she'd changed clothes since this morning. The conservative blouse and slacks were gone, replaced by a dress I didn't recognize. Her hair was different too, styled like she was going somewhere that mattered. I know, she was saying into the phone. He's so clueless, it's almost sad. No, he won't suspect anything. Trust me, Nick's too busy playing with his little construction toys to notice what's happening right under his nose. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Not rage, that would come later. This was something else. Clarity, maybe. The moment when all the pieces finally click into place and you realize you've been playing checkers while everyone else was playing chess. But here's the thing about us blue-collar guys that the white-collar crowd never figures out. We know how to plan. We know how to build something from the ground up, step by step, making sure every foundation is solid before we move to the next level, and we know how to tear things down just as efficiently. I started the truck and pulled into the driveway. Elise jumped like I'd fired a gun, spinning around with wide eyes before forcing a smile that looked as genuine as a $3 bill. Hey, honey, she called out, ending her call and slipping the phone into her purse. You're home early. Job finished ahead of schedule, I said, climbing out of the truck. Funny thing about having a good crew, they actually show up and do the work. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. That's great. I was just talking to Tracy about the Henderson wedding next month. You know how she gets about planning these things. Tracy, her best friend since college. The same Tracy who'd been posting pictures on social media every Tuesday and Thursday for the past month, always at home with her kids, never out planning weddings. Yeah, I said, walking past her toward the front door. Tracy's a real planner. Inside, the house felt different. Maybe it was knowing what I knew now, or maybe I'd been blind to it before, but everything seemed staged. The throw pillows were arranged too perfectly. The magazines on the coffee table were fanned out like we were expecting company. Even the air freshener smell was stronger than usual, like she was trying to cover up something. How was your day? I asked, settling into my recliner and grabbing the remote. Oh, meetings, presentations, the usual corporate nonsense. She was moving around the kitchen, putting away dishes that were already clean, wiping down counters that didn't need wiping. Nervous energy. Amanda's really pushing the team hard on the Morrison account. Amanda, her boss, the ice queen who ran the marketing department like her own personal kingdom. I'd met her exactly twice in 5 years, both times at company Christmas parties where she'd looked at me like I was something she'd stepped in. Morrison account, huh? I flipped through channels, not really watching. That the one keeping you out so late? Her hands stilled for just a second. Yeah, it's a big client. Lots of late meetings, brainstorming sessions. You know how it is? Sure. I found a baseball game and settled back. Hey, speaking of late meetings, my buddy Jim Garrison called today. Wants to come by tomorrow night for a beer and some pool. That okay with you? Jim Garrison? The dish towel in her hands twisted into a rope. The lawyer? Yeah, we went to high school together, remember? He's thinking about having some work done on his house, wants to pick my brain about contractors. Which was complete nonsense, of course. Jim's house was perfect, and he had more money than sense anyway, but Elise didn't know that. Tomorrow's Thursday, she said carefully. I might have to work late again. No problem. Gives us guys a chance to catch up without boring you with construction talk. She nodded, but I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. Having a divorce lawyer in her house, even socially, was going to make her sweat. Good. Let her wonder what I knew and when I'd figured it out. I waited until she went upstairs to take a bath before pulling out my laptop. The home security system I'd installed last year was top of the line. Motion sensors, cameras, the works. I'd told Elise it was for insurance purposes, to get a discount on our homeowner's policy. That was only half true. The real reason was that I'd grown up in a neighborhood where you learned early to watch your back. Old habits, you know? But those old habits were about to pay off in ways I'd never expected. I pulled up the footage from last Tuesday and Thursday. There it was, clear as day. Ethan Parker's silver BMW pulling into my driveway at 2:15 p.m. on Tuesday. Elise greeting him at the door like they were old friends. Him leaving 3 hours later, both of them laughing about something on the front porch. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Ethan Parker, regional sales manager for some medical equipment company, divorced, 42, with a reputation around town for being a smooth talker and a smooth operator. I'd met him at a few social functions over the years, the kind of guy who wore expensive watches and talked about his golf game like it mattered to anyone but him. The kind of guy who thought he was smarter than everyone else in the room. The kind of guy who was about to learn the difference between book smart and street smart. I made copies of the footage, uploaded them to a secure cloud account, and then did something that would have made Elise's head spin if she'd known about it. I transferred our joint savings account into my business account. All of it. Legally perfectly, since both our names were on both accounts. Then I canceled her credit cards. Well, had them reissued with new numbers due to suspicious activity. The new cards would take 5 to 7 business days to arrive. By the time I was finished, it was past midnight. Elise was asleep, or pretending to be, when I finally came to bed. She was curled up on her side, facing away from me, breathing in that too regular pattern people use when they're faking sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to her pretend to dream, and started planning. Not the hot-headed, break-everything kind of planning that gets you in trouble. The careful, methodical kind that gets you results. Tomorrow night, Jim Garrison would come over. We'd play pool, drink beer, and talk loud enough for Elise to hear every word from upstairs. Jim owed me a favor from when I'd helped him out of a jam with a contractor who'd tried to rip him off. Time to collect. And after that? Well, Elise wanted to play games. She thought she was dealing with some clueless blue-collar husband who'd never see it coming. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. Jim Garrison showed up at 7:30 sharp, carrying a 6-pack of imported beer and wearing a grin that told me he was enjoying this more than he probably should have been. "Nick," he said, shaking my hand on the front porch. "Good to see you. Thanks for having me over." "Thanks for coming. Elise is upstairs working on some presentation, so we've got the basement to ourselves." We'd barely made it down the stairs when I heard the floor creak overhead. Someone was moving around up there, probably trying to get close enough to the heating vent to hear what we were talking about. Perfect. "So," Jim said, racking the balls on my pool table, "you mentioned on the phone you might need some legal advice." "Yeah." I opened 2 beers and handed him one. "Hypothetically speaking, if a guy wanted to protect his assets before a marriage went south, what would be the smart moves?" Jim lined up his brake shot. "Hypothetically, document everything. Financial records, property ownership, evidence of any extracurricular activities. Make sure you understand what's joint property and what's separate. And whatever you do, don't let emotions drive your decisions." The balls scattered across the table with a satisfying crack. 2 solids dropped. "What about business assets?" I asked, chalking my cue. "If a guy built a company from scratch during the marriage?" "Complicated. Depends on the state, depends on how it's structured, depends on whether the spouse contributed to the business in any meaningful way." Jim studied the table, then sank the 3-ball in the corner pocket. "But if the guy was smart, he'd make sure his business accounts were separate and well documented. Show that any growth came from his work, not marital funds." The floor creaked again. Whoever was upstairs was definitely listening. "And if there was infidelity involved?" I kept my voice casual, like we were discussing the weather. Jim's next shot missed by an inch. He straightened up and looked at me directly. "That's where things get interesting, especially if the cheating spouse was using marital funds to finance their affair. Hotels, gifts, restaurants, that's dissipation of marital assets. A good lawyer can make that very expensive for the unfaithful party." I sank 2 balls in a row before missing an easy shot on the 8. My hands were steadier than they'd been in months. "Of course," Jim continued. "The best revenge isn't always financial. Sometimes it's social. Reputation matters in a small town like this. People remember who they can trust and who they can't. We played 3 games, talking loud enough to make sure every word carried upstairs. By the time Jim left at 10:30, we'd covered asset protection, evidence gathering, and the finer points of Massachusetts divorce law. We'd also established that I had a very good lawyer who was very interested in helping me out. Elise was in bed when I came upstairs, but she wasn't asleep. I could tell by the way she was breathing, too quick and shallow. She was probably lying there wondering how much I knew and how much trouble she was in. Let her wonder. The next morning, she was up early, dressed for work in a sharp black suit that probably cost more than I made in a week. She was moving with purpose, like a woman with problems to solve. "Morning," I said, pouring coffee into my travel mug. "Sleep okay?" "Fine." She was checking her phone, scrolling through messages. "I might be late tonight. The Morrison thing is really heating up." "No problem. I'll probably be at the job site until dark anyway. We're pouring foundation tomorrow. Want to make sure everything's ready." She nodded absently, still focused on her phone. Then she grabbed her purse and headed for the garage. "Hey, Elise?" She turned back, and for just a second, I saw something like fear flicker across her face. "Have a good day at work?" The fear was replaced by confusion. She'd been expecting confrontation, accusations, drama. Instead, she got normal. That was going to eat at her more than any argument would have. After she left, I called my foreman, Big Mike, and told him to meet me at the diner downtown instead of the job site. Mike O'Sullivan was 6'4", 260 pounds of pure Boston Irish, with hands like catcher's mitts, and a heart bigger than his considerable appetite. He'd been working for me for 8 years, ever since I'd hired him away from a company that was treating him like disposable help. Mike was also the most loyal person I'd ever met, and he hated cheaters almost as much as he hated people who didn't pay their bills on time. "Boss," he said, sliding into the booth across from me and signaling the waitress for coffee. "What's going on? You sounded weird on the phone." I laid it out for him, all of it. The hotel charges, the security footage, the pattern of lies. Mike's face got darker with every detail until he looked like a thundercloud with a crew cut. "That piece of garbage," he growled. "And in your house, too. What do you need me to do?" "I need you to take some pictures. Ethan Parker drives a silver BMW, license plate." I slid him a piece of paper with all the details. "He's been meeting my wife at the Meridian Hotel downtown, Tuesdays and Thursdays, usually between 2 and 6. You want me to catch them coming and going?" "Just him. I don't need pictures of Elise. I've got plenty of evidence already. But I want documentation of his car at that hotel, time-stamped with the license plate visible. Can you do that without getting spotted?" Mike grinned, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Boss, I spent 2 years doing surveillance for a private investigator before I got into construction. This guy won't even know I'm there." "Good. And Mike, this stays between us for now. When the time comes to make this public, I want to control how and when it happens." "You got it." He leaned back in his seat. "You know, I never liked that wife of yours. Too fancy, always looking down her nose at working people. But I figured it wasn't my place to say anything. Probably wouldn't have listened anyway. Sometimes you have to learn things the hard way." "Yeah, well, sounds like she's about to learn a few things the hard way herself." After breakfast, I drove to the job site and threw myself into work. Physical labor has always been my way of thinking through problems, and I had a lot to think through. Revenge is like construction. You need a solid plan, quality materials, and perfect timing. Rush the job, and the whole thing falls apart. By lunchtime, I had the framework of a plan. It was elegant in its simplicity and brutal in its effectiveness. Elise thought she was playing me for a fool, but she'd made one critical mistake. She'd assumed I was as stupid as she needed me to be. That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my accountant, asking him to prepare a complete financial statement for my business. The second was to my insurance agent, updating the beneficiaries on my life insurance policy. The third was to Lucy Martinez, the bartender at the Brass Tap. Lucy had been pouring drinks in this town for 15 years. She knew everyone, heard everything, and had a memory like a steel trap. More importantly, she owed me a favor from when I'd helped her brother out of a jam with a building inspector. "Lucy, it's Nick Foster. You got a minute?" "For you, honey, I got all day. What's up?" "I need to ask you about something, but it's sensitive. Can we meet somewhere private?" "Come by the bar around 4. It'll be quiet until happy hour." The Brass Tap was exactly what it sounded like. A working-class bar with cheap beer, good burgers, and no pretensions. It was the kind of place where Elise wouldn't be caught deceased, which made it perfect for what I had in mind. Lucy was wiping down glasses when I walked in, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and her expression curious. "Okay, Nick, what's this about?" You look like someone stole your favorite hammer." I told her everything. Lucy's expression went from curious to angry to calculating in the space of 5 minutes. "That witch," she said when I finished. "I never liked her, you know. She came in here once with some friends from work, acted like she was slumming it, complained about everything. The music was too loud, the beer was too cheap, the crowd was too rough. Made it real clear she thought she was better than everyone else. I need your help, Lucy. When this all comes out, and it's going to come out, I want it to happen here, in front of people who matter, people who know me, who know what kind of man I am. What do you need me to do? Just keep your ears open, and when the time comes, make sure there's a crowd here to see the show." Lucy's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Honey, consider it done. This town loves a good scandal, especially when it involves someone who thinks she's too good for the rest of us." I left the bar feeling better than I had in weeks. The pieces were falling into place, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I was in control. That night, Elise came home at almost 11, claiming her meeting had run late. She smelled like expensive cologne, not the kind I wore, and her hair was messed up despite her attempts to fix it in the car. "How was work?" I asked from my chair, not looking up from the newspaper. "Exhausting. This Morrison account is really demanding. I think I'm going to take a shower and go straight to bed." "Sure. Oh, by the way, I ran into Tom Henderson at the job site today. He mentioned that Tracy was looking for you earlier. Something about the wedding planning you two were discussing." Elise froze halfway to the stairs. "Tracy was looking for me?" "Yeah. Apparently she stopped by your office around 3, but your assistant said you were in meetings all afternoon. Tracy seemed confused, thought you two had plans to go over some details." I watched her face in the reflection of the dark window. She was trying to figure out how to explain being unreachable during the exact time she was supposed to be in meetings. "Oh, that. We rescheduled. Last-minute change?" "Makes sense. Well, good night." She practically ran up the stairs. I sat there for another hour, reading the same newspaper article over and over, listening to her move around upstairs. She was probably lying in bed right now, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many other little inconsistencies I'd noticed. The answer was all of them. Every lie, every excuse, every time she'd come home smelling like another man. I'd been keeping a mental ledger for months, and now it was time to balance the books. Tomorrow was Friday. Elise always worked late on Fridays, or claimed to. But according to Mike's surveillance, Ethan Parker's car hadn't been at the Meridian on Fridays, which meant she was meeting him somewhere else, or she was lying about working late for entirely different reasons. Either way, it was time to find out exactly what my wife was up to when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Friday afternoon, I left the job site early and parked across the street from Elise's office building. Her company occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming glass tower downtown, the kind of place where everyone wore suits and talked about synergy and market penetration like they were curing cancer. At 5:15, I watched her walk out of the building with Ethan Parker. They weren't trying to hide it. He had his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward his BMW like they were a real couple, like they had every right to be together, like I didn't exist. I followed them at a distance, staying back far enough to avoid being spotted. They drove to Chez Laurent, the fanciest restaurant in town, the kind of place where dinner for 2 cost more than most people made in a day. I parked across the street and called Big Mike. "Mike, it's me. You busy?" "Just finished up at the Morrison site. Why?" "I need you to meet me at Chez Laurent. Bring your camera." "The fancy French place? Boss, I don't think they'll let me in wearing work clothes." "You're not going in. Just get some pictures of a silver BMW in the parking lot. License plate Charlie Delta 7921. On my way." While I waited for Mike, I made another call. This one to Blake Morrison, a private investigator I'd found through Jim Garrison. Blake was ex-Boston PD, forced into early retirement after taking a bullet in the leg during a drug bust. He was expensive, thorough, and had a reputation for getting results. "Blake, it's Nick Foster. We talked earlier this week?" "Right. The cheating wife case. What do you need?" "I need a complete background check on Ethan Parker. Employment history, financial records, any complaints or lawsuits. And I need it fast." "How fast?" "By Monday." "That's going to cost extra." "Money's not an issue." "Okay. I'll have something for you by Monday afternoon." Mike showed up 20 minutes later, driving his beat-up pickup truck and carrying a camera with a telephoto lens that looked like it belonged on a nature documentary. "Where'd you get that thing?" I asked. "Buddy of mine does wedding photography. Borrowed it for the weekend." He grinned. Told him I was thinking about getting into the business. We spent 2 hours documenting Ethan's car in the restaurant parking lot. Mike got shots from every angle, with timestamps and clear views of the license plate. Professional quality stuff that would hold up in court if it came to that. At 9:30, Elise and Ethan came out of the restaurant. They were both laughing, probably feeling clever about their little secret romance. Ethan opened the car door for her like a gentleman, and they drove off into the night. I followed them back to Ethan's apartment complex, an upscale development on the north side of town, the kind of place with a doorman and valet parking and monthly rent that cost more than most people's mortgages. The buildings themselves looked like something out of a glossy brochure: glass balconies, manicured hedges, a fountain in the courtyard that probably ran up a water bill the size of my monthly paycheck. Everything about the place screamed money, the kind of polished luxury that people like Ethan wore like a second skin. They disappeared into the building together. "You want me to wait and see when she comes out?" Mike asked, watching them disappear through the revolving doors. His voice was steady, but he kept glancing at me out of the corner of his eye, like he was waiting for me to crack. "No, I've seen enough." But I hadn't, really. Seeing it with my own eyes was different from knowing it intellectually. There's something about watching your wife of 12 years walk into another man's apartment that hits you like a physical blow. A punch right under the ribs, the kind that steals your breath before you even realize you're hurt. It makes it real in a way that credit card statements and security footage never could. A man can talk himself out of anything if the evidence is just numbers or grainy screenshots. But watching her walk in, seeing the way she tilted her head toward him, the way she laughed at something he said, that was undeniable. I drove home and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes, trying to decide how I felt about what I'd just witnessed. Angry, sure. Betrayed, absolutely. But there was something else. Something I hadn't expected. Relief. For months, I'd been questioning myself, wondering if I was being paranoid, if I was seeing things that weren't there. Elise had gotten good at making me feel like the crazy one. Little comments like, "You're imagining things," or "You need to trust me," or that tired old classic, "You're being insecure." Now I knew for certain, and that knowledge was oddly liberating. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. My wife was cheating on me, and now I had proof, real, tangible proof that couldn't be explained away or twisted into something else. More importantly, I had a plan. Elise didn't come home until after midnight. The house smelled faintly like her perfume when she slipped into bed beside me, and I pretended to be asleep, breathing slowly and steadily as she moved quietly under the covers. But I was wide awake, eyes open in the dark, staring at the faint glow from the streetlight outside and thinking about what came next. She had no idea that everything had already shifted, that I wasn't playing the clueless husband anymore. Saturday morning, she was up early again, claiming she had to go into the office to catch up on work. Her voice was syrupy sweet, practiced. Another lie, but I didn't call her on it. Instead, I waited until she left, then drove to the brass tap. Lucy was setting up for the lunch crowd, arranging bottles and checking inventory. The bar was empty except for one old-timer nursing a beer and watching SportsCenter on the big screen. The place smelled like fried appetizers and years of spilled drinks. Comforting in a way, familiar, honest. Unlike my home, which suddenly felt like a museum of lies. "Nick," she said when she saw me, "you look like hell. This thing with your wife really getting to you." "I'm fine, just tired. Listen, I need to ask you about something. You know most of the people in this town, right?" "Honey, I know everybody in this town. What do you need?" "Ethan Parker. What do you know about him?" Lucy's expression soured like I'd asked her about a virus. "That piece of work? He comes in here sometimes with his buddies from the country club, acts like he's doing us a favor by gracing us with his presence, always complaining about something. The service is too slow, the beer's not cold enough, the music's too loud." She rolled her eyes. "If he ever smiled, his face might crack. What about his reputation? With women, I mean." "Oh, he's a real charmer. Thinks he's God's gift to the female population. I've seen him hit on married women right in front of their husbands. No shame at all." She paused, studying my face. "Why? Is he the one?" "Yeah, he's the one." Well, that explains a lot. I always wondered what kind of man would be stupid enough to mess around with another guy's wife in a town this size. Now I know, the kind who thinks he's untouchable. "What do you mean?" "Ethan Parker's never had to face consequences for anything in his life. Rich family, good job, looks like he stepped out of a magazine. He's used to getting whatever he wants, whenever he wants it. Probably figures if he gets caught, he'll just charm his way out of trouble." "He's about to learn different," Lucy grinned. "What do you need me to do?" "Nothing yet, but when the time comes, I'm going to need this place packed. Can you make that happen?" "Are you kidding?" Once word gets out that Ethan Parker's been messing around with a married woman, half the town will show up just to watch the fireworks. The other half will come to see if the rumors are true. Good. I'll let you know when. I spent the rest of Saturday working on my plan. Every detail had to be perfect, every move calculated. I wasn't going to get a second chance at this, so the first chance had to count. I wrote lists, reviewed timelines, rehearsed conversations in my head. By the time the sun went down, my nerves were tight, but my resolve was sharper than ever. Sunday morning, Elise claimed she was going shopping with Tracy. Another lie, Tracy had posted pictures on social media of herself at her daughter's soccer game. But I didn't say anything. Instead, I followed her. She drove straight to Ethan's apartment. I parked across the street and called Blake Morrison. "Blake, it's Nick. I need you to add something to that background check." "What's that?" "I want to know if Ethan Parker has ever been sued for harassment, or if there have been any complaints filed against him with HR departments." "That's going to be harder to find. Personnel records are usually sealed." "I don't need official records. Just rumors, gossip, anything that might indicate a pattern of behavior." "I'll see what I can dig up." At noon, Elise came out of Ethan's building and drove to the mall, probably buying something to make herself feel better about lying to her husband, or maybe picking up something special for her next rendezvous with her boyfriend. I didn't follow her to the mall. Instead, I drove to Ethan's apartment complex and had a conversation with the valet parking attendant. A $20 tip and a story about being a private investigator working a case was enough to get him talking. According to the valet, Ethan had a reputation among the building staff. He was demanding, rude, and cheap with tips. He also had a lot of female visitors, most of them married, and he wasn't particularly discreet about it. "Guy thinks he's some kind of player," the valet said. "Always bragging about his conquests, talking about how easy it is to seduce bored housewives. Real piece of work, if you ask me." "Has he ever had any trouble? Angry husbands, that sort of thing?" "Not yet, but it's only a matter of time. Guy's going to mess with the wrong woman sooner or later." Sooner than he thinks, I thought. That evening, Elise came home with shopping bags full of new clothes and a story about running into Tracy at the mall. She was in a good mood, humming while she cooked dinner, acting like everything was normal. "How was your day?" she asked, setting a plate in front of me. "Quiet. Caught up on some paperwork, watched the game. You?" "Oh, you know. Girl time with Tracy. We looked at bridesmaid dresses, talked about the wedding plans, the usual." "Sounds nice." We ate dinner in relative silence, both of us pretending everything was fine, but I could see the guilt eating at her, the way she kept glancing at me when she thought I wasn't looking. She was wondering how long she could keep this up, how long before something slipped and the whole house of cards came tumbling down. She didn't know it had already started falling. After dinner, I went down to my workshop in the basement and started building something I'd been thinking about for weeks. A present for Ethan Parker, something that would help him remember our first real meeting. It was going to be a very memorable meeting indeed. Monday morning brought Blake Morrison's report, and it was even better than I'd hoped. Ethan Parker wasn't just a cheater, he was a predator with a pattern. 3 different women had filed complaints against him over the past 5 years. Harassment at his previous job, inappropriate conduct with a client's wife, and a messy situation involving his boss's daughter that had resulted in a quiet resignation and a sealed settlement. The man was a walking lawsuit waiting to happen, and somehow he'd managed to keep landing on his feet. Rich family connections, expensive lawyers, and a talent for finding new jobs before his reputation caught up with him. But his luck was about to run out. I called Jim Garrison and asked him to meet me for lunch. We sat in a corner booth at Murphy's Deli, away from the other customers, while I laid out what I'd learned. "This guy's a real piece of work," Jim said, flipping through Blake's report. "How do you want to handle it?" "Carefully. I don't want to do anything that could come back to bite me later, but I want him to know that I know, and I want him to understand that his little game is over." "What about your wife?" "Elise made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences." Jim nodded. "You know, there's something else you should consider. If this guy has a pattern of predatory behavior, your wife might not be his only current target. Guys like this usually have multiple situations going at once." That was an interesting thought. If Ethan was juggling multiple affairs, it would make him vulnerable in ways I hadn't considered. Can Blake look into that? I'm sure he can. Might cost extra, but it sounds like you're not worried about money. I'm not. I want to know everything about this guy. His habits, his weaknesses, his secrets. All of it. After lunch, I drove to the job site and found Big Mike poring over blueprints with the electrical contractor. The foundation pour had gone perfectly, and we were ahead of schedule for the first time in months. "Boss," Mike said when he saw me, "got those pictures you wanted. Also got something else you might find interesting. He handed me a manila envelope full of photographs. Ethan's car at the hotel, at the restaurant, at his apartment building. Professional quality surveillance photos that documented a clear pattern of behavior. "What's the something else?" I asked. "Well, I was sitting outside that fancy restaurant Friday night, and I saw something funny. Your boy Ethan got a phone call right before he and your wife came out. Seemed upset about something, lots of gesturing, pacing around. Then he made another call, and I could tell he was talking to a woman. Different woman, if you know what I mean." "How could you tell?" "Body language. The way he was talking, all smooth and apologetic. Same way he talks to your wife, but with a different energy, like he was trying to calm someone down, make promises." So Jim was right. Ethan was juggling multiple affairs, and at least one of them was getting complicated. "You think you could find out who he was talking to?" "Maybe. I got a buddy who works for the phone company. Might be able to pull some records, see who he's been calling." "Do it. But be careful. I don't want this coming back on you." "Don't worry about me, boss. I know how to handle myself." That afternoon, I got a text from Elise saying she'd be working late again, another Morrison account emergency that required her immediate attention. I drove to her office building and waited. Sure enough, at 5:30, she walked out with Ethan. But instead of going to dinner or his apartment, they drove to a different hotel, the Riverside Inn, a smaller, more discreet place on the outskirts of town. I followed them at a distance and watched them check in. They were getting bolder, more careless. Or maybe they were just getting tired of sneaking around. Either way, it was time to make my move. I parked across the street and called the hotel. "Riverside Inn, how can I help you?" "Hi, I'm trying to reach my business partner, Ethan Parker. I believe he's staying with you tonight." "Let me check." "Yes, Mr. Parker is in room 237. Would you like me to connect you?" "No, that's okay. I'll call his cell. Thanks." Room 237. Second floor, facing the parking lot. Perfect. I drove home and waited. At 11:30, Elise came through the front door, looking flushed and guilty and trying too hard to act normal. "Hey," she said, hanging up her coat. "Sorry I'm so late. The Morrison thing is really heating up." "No problem. How's it going?" "Oh, good, really good. I think we're close to closing the deal." "That's great. You must be exhausted." "Yeah, I think I'll just grab a shower and go to bed." "Sure. Oh, by the way, I got an interesting phone call today." She froze halfway to the stairs. "Oh? From who?" "Guy named Blake Morrison, private investigator. Said he was working on a case involving adultery and financial fraud. Wanted to know if I'd noticed any unusual charges on my credit cards lately." The color drained from her face. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I'd check my statements and get back to him if I found anything suspicious." She stood there for a long moment, probably trying to figure out if this was a coincidence or if I was on to her. Finally, she managed a weak smile. "That's weird. Why would he call you?" "No idea. Probably just calling random people, fishing for information. You know how these guys work." "Yeah, probably." She practically ran up the stairs. I sat in my chair for another hour, listening to her move around upstairs. She was probably lying in bed right now, wondering if I knew about Ethan, wondering if I'd been playing dumb this whole time. The answer was yes to both questions, but she wouldn't have to wonder much longer. Tuesday morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Ethan's office building. His company occupied a suite on the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass and chrome and expensive furniture. I took the elevator up and walked into the reception area like I belonged there. "I'm here to see Ethan Parker," I told the receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a practiced smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but tell him Nick Foster is here. He'll want to see me." She made the call, and I watched her face change as she listened to Ethan's response. Confusion, then concern, then something that might have been fear. "He'll be right out," she said. Ethan appeared 2 minutes later, looking like a man who'd just seen a ghost. He was handsome in that generic corporate way that some women found attractive. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect suit. But up close, I could see the weakness in his eyes, the soft look of a man who'd never had to fight for anything in his life. "Nick," he said, extending his hand like we were old friends. "This is unexpected." I didn't shake his hand. "We need to talk, privately." "Of course. My office is right this way." He led me down a hallway lined with motivational posters and corporate awards. His office was exactly what I'd expected. Big desk, expensive chair, window with a view of the city. The office of a man who thought he was important. "Please have a seat," he said, closing the door behind us. "What can I do for you?" "You can stop screwing my wife." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Ethan's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, denial, calculation, and finally resignation. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Sure you do. Room 237 at the Riverside Inn. Last night, 11:30. Should I keep going?" He sat down heavily in his chair, suddenly looking older than his 42 years. "Look, Nick." "No, you look. I know about the hotels, the restaurants, the little visits to your apartment. I know about the credit card charges and the lies and the whole sordid mess. What I want to know is what you're going to do about it." What do you mean?" "I mean, you're going to end it. Today. You're going to tell Elise it's over, and you're going to stay away from her, permanently." Ethan leaned back in his chair, and I saw some of his confidence returning. "And if I don't?" "Then everyone in this town is going to know exactly what kind of man you are. Your boss, your clients, your friends at the country club. Everyone." "You can't prove anything." I pulled out my phone and showed him one of Mike's photographs. Ethan's BMW in the hotel parking lot. License plate clearly visible. Timestamp showing yesterday's date. "Want to bet?" His confidence evaporated. "What do you want?" "I want you gone. Out of Elise's life, out of my life, out of this town if possible. And I want you to understand that if you ever come near my wife again, the consequences will be much worse than public embarrassment." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm educating you. There's a difference." I stood up and headed for the door, then turned back. "Oh, and Ethan, you might want to be more careful about your other relationships too. Small towns talk, and people are starting to notice patterns." I left him sitting there, looking like a man who just realized he was in way over his head. The next phase of my plan was about to begin, and Ethan Parker was going to learn that some games have consequences he never saw coming. Wednesday afternoon, everything started falling apart for Ethan Parker. It began with a phone call to his office from a woman named Jennifer Walsh, whose husband had hired Blake Morrison to investigate her suspicious late nights. Blake had connected Jennifer's affair to Ethan, and now her husband was threatening to go public with the information. I knew about the call because Mike's friend at the phone company had come through with Ethan's phone records. Jennifer Walsh was one of 3 married women Ethan had been juggling, along with my wife and a woman named Carol Stevens, whose husband was a city councilman. 3 affairs, 3 angry husbands, 3 potential scandals. Ethan's carefully managed life was about to become very complicated. The second blow came when his boss, Amanda Richardson, the same Amanda who was Elise's supervisor, received an anonymous package containing photographs of Ethan's car at various hotels, along with a detailed timeline of his activities during business hours. I wasn't the one who sent the package, but I had a pretty good idea who did. Blake Morrison had a reputation for thorough work, and he'd made it clear that he didn't like men who preyed on married women. The third blow was the most satisfying. At 4:30 that afternoon, Ethan's ex-wife showed up at his office building with a lawyer and a court order demanding a review of their divorce settlement. Apparently, someone had informed her that Ethan's financial situation was much better than he'd claimed during their divorce proceedings. Again, I had no idea who might have contacted her. Blake Morrison was very thorough in his investigations. By 5 o'clock, Ethan Parker was having the worst day of his life, and it was about to get worse. I was waiting in the parking garage when he came down to his car. He looked like a man who'd been hit by a truck, disheveled, sweating, constantly checking his phone for more bad news. "Hello, Ethan." He spun around, nearly dropping his keys. "Nick, what are you doing here?" "Waiting for you. We need to finish our conversation from yesterday." "Look, I don't know what you think you're accomplishing, but I'm accomplishing exactly what I set out to accomplish. Your life is falling apart, and it's going to keep falling apart until you do what I told you to do. You can't prove I had anything to do with... I don't need to prove anything. I just need to keep asking questions and letting other people draw their own conclusions. Amazing how much trouble a man can get into when people start paying attention to his behavior." Ethan leaned against his car, looking defeated. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to call Elise right now and tell her it's over. I want you to explain that you're ending all your extracurricular activities and focusing on salvaging what's left of your career, and I want you to make it clear that if she tries to contact you again, you'll report it as harassment." "That's not fair. She's as much to blame as I am." "Fair?" I stepped closer, and he actually backed away. "You think any of this is fair? You think it's fair that you've been using my credit cards to pay for hotel rooms? You think it's fair that you've been in my house, in my bed, with my wife? We never... Save it. I don't care about the details. I care about the solution. Make the call." He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed Elise's number. I could hear her voice when she answered, bright and cheerful, probably expecting to make plans for another romantic evening. "Elise, it's me. We need to talk." No, not tonight. We can't see each other anymore. Because it's over. The whole thing. I'm ending it. No, this isn't negotiable. Don't call me, don't come to my office, don't try to contact me. It's finished. He hung up and looked at me with something that might have been respect. There, it's done. Good. Now stay away from her. Stay away from all of them. And Ethan? If I hear that you've started up with someone else's wife, I'll make today look like a picnic. I left him standing there in the parking garage, probably wondering how his perfect life had turned into a nightmare so quickly. The answer was simple. He'd picked the wrong man to mess with. I drove home, knowing that Elise would be there soon, probably in tears, probably looking for comfort and explanations. I was ready for her. She came through the front door at 6:15, her face streaked with mascara and her hands shaking. "Nick," she said, her voice breaking, "we need to talk." "Sure. What about?" I made a mistake. A big mistake. I've been seeing someone and I know it was wrong, but you thought you could get away with it." She stared at me, probably trying to figure out how much I knew and how long I'd known it. "You know. I've known for months, Elise. The hotel charges, the lies about working late, the way you've been acting. Did you really think I was that stupid?" She collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "I'm so sorry. It didn't mean anything. It was just, I don't know what I was thinking. You were thinking you could have your cake and eat it too. You were thinking you could keep me around to pay the bills while you had your fun with someone more exciting. That's not true. I love you. I've always loved you." "No, you don't. You love the security I provide. You love the house and the credit cards and the comfortable life, but you don't love me, and you haven't for a long time." She looked up at me with desperate eyes. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through it. I'll do whatever it takes. It's too late for that." I handed her the divorce papers Jim Garrison had prepared. She stared at them like they were written in a foreign language. "You're divorcing me?" "I already filed. You've got 30 days to respond." But we can work this out. I made a mistake. But that doesn't mean our marriage is over." "Yes, it does. You made a choice, Elise. You chose Ethan Parker over me. Chose lying over honesty. Chose your own selfish desires over our marriage. Now you get to live with that choice." She read through the papers, her face getting paler with each page. "You're taking everything, the house, the business, the savings accounts. I'm taking what's mine. The house was bought with my money, the business is mine, and the savings came from my work. You're entitled to half of what we accumulated during the marriage, minus what you spent on your affair." "What I spent on my affair?" "Hotel rooms, restaurants, gifts, clothes. It all adds up, Elise. Dissipation of marital assets. Jim says it could be quite expensive for you." She sat there in stunned silence for several minutes, probably trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore. You should have thought about that before you decided to cheat on me. You're really going to throw away 12 years of marriage over one mistake?" "One mistake?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Elise, you've been lying to me for months. You've been using our money to finance your affair. You've been bringing another man into our house, our bed. That's not one mistake. That's a pattern of betrayal that goes to the core of who you are." She tried to argue, tried to bargain, tried to make promises about changing and being better. But I was done listening. I'd heard enough lies to last a lifetime. Finally, she gathered up the papers and headed for the door. "I'll need some time to get my things together." "You've got until the end of the week. After that, anything left here goes to charity." She paused at the door, looking back at me one last time. "I really did love you, Nick. I know you don't believe me, but it's true." "Maybe, but love without respect, without honesty, without loyalty, that's not really love at all. That's just convenience." After she left, I sat in my chair and tried to figure out how I felt about what had just happened. Sad, certainly, relieved, definitely, but also something else, something that felt like freedom. For the first time in months, I didn't have to wonder what Elise was really doing when she said she was working late. I didn't have to question every story, every excuse, every explanation. I didn't have to live with the constant nagging doubt that my wife was lying to me. The marriage was over, but my life was just beginning. Friday night at the Brass Tap was standing room only. Word had gotten out about Elise and Ethan's affair, and the whole town had turned up to see the aftermath. Lucy had done her job perfectly. By Thursday afternoon, everyone in town knew that Nick Foster's wife had been cheating on him with that arrogant piece of work from the country club. The reaction was exactly what I'd expected. In a working-class town like ours, people didn't have much sympathy for cheaters, especially when the cheater thought she was too good for the rest of us. I walked into the bar at 8 o'clock, and the crowd parted like I was some kind of celebrity. People I barely knew were patting me on the back, buying me drinks, telling me I was better off without her. "Nick," Lucy called out from behind the bar. "Your usual? Make it a double." She poured me a whiskey and slid it across the bar. "How you holding up?" "Better than expected. It's amazing how good it feels to stop pretending everything's fine." "I bet. You hear about what happened to your boy Ethan?" "No." "What?" "Got fired yesterday. Apparently his boss found out about all his extracurricular activities and decided he was a liability. Word is he's leaving town, trying to find work somewhere his reputation hasn't caught up with him yet." That was news to me, but not surprising. Amanda Richardson was nothing if not practical, and having an employee who specialized in seducing married women was bad for business. "What about Elise?" "Suspended pending investigation. Apparently someone raised questions about her relationship with a vendor, possible conflicts of interest. Could be looking at termination if they find anything inappropriate." I sipped my whiskey and tried to look surprised. Blake Morrison really was thorough in his work. The crowd was getting louder, more festive. People were sharing stories about Elise's attitude over the years, her condescending comments, her obvious disdain for anyone who didn't meet her standards. It was like the whole town was finally getting a chance to say what they had been thinking for years. "You know what I never liked about her?" said Tom Henderson, settling onto the bar stool next to me. "The way she acted like she was doing you a favor by being married to you, like you should be grateful that someone so sophisticated would lower herself to be with a construction worker." "Yeah, well, turns out sophistication doesn't mean much if you don't have character to go with it." "Amen to that." Around 9:30, the door opened and Elise walked in. The bar went quiet. Every conversation stopped, every head turned, every eye focused on the woman who'd just walked into what was essentially her own public trial. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and her face was puffy from crying. But she held her head up and walked straight to the bar like she had every right to be there. "Hello, Nick." "Elise? Can we talk? Privately?" "I don't think there's anything left to say." "Please, 5 minutes." I looked around the bar. Every person in the place was watching us, waiting to see what would happen next. This was better than cable television. 5 minutes. We walked to a corner table, and the crowd shifted to give us space while still staying close enough to hear every word. "I know you hate me," she began. "I don't hate you, Elise. I just don't trust you, don't respect you, and don't want to be married to you anymore. I lost my job. I heard. Amanda says I violated company policy by having a personal relationship with a vendor. She says it created a conflict of interest." "Did it?" "Ethan's company was bidding on a contract with us. I might have influenced the decision-making process." So she hadn't just been cheating on me, she'd been using her position at work to benefit her lover. The hits just kept coming. "That was stupid, even for you." I know it was stupid. Everything I did was stupid. But Nick, I'm losing everything. My job, my home, my marriage. I don't have anywhere to go. You should have thought of that before you decided to cheat on me. I made a mistake. Stop calling it a mistake. My voice was louder than I'd intended, and the entire bar could hear every word. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill or leaving the lights on. What you did was a choice, a series of choices. You chose to lie to me, you chose to cheat on me, you chose to use our money to finance your affair. Own it. She started crying again, but I was past the point where her tears had any effect on me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know you are. You're sorry you got caught, sorry you're facing consequences, sorry your perfect little plan blew up in your face. But you're not sorry for what you did to me, to our marriage, to the life we built together. You're just sorry it didn't work out the way you wanted." The bar was silent. Even the jukebox had stopped playing. "What do you want me to say?" she asked. "Nothing. There's nothing you can say that will change anything. You made your choice, and now you get to live with it." "So that's it? 12 years of marriage, and you're just going to throw it all away?" "I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that." I stood up and walked back to the bar, leaving her sitting alone at the table. The crowd parted to let me through, and Lucy had another whiskey waiting for me. "That was brutal," she said quietly. "That was honest." Behind me, I could hear Elise getting up from the table, walking toward the door. The crowd watched her go, and I could feel the weight of their judgment following her out into the night. "So what now?" Lucy asked. "Now I get on with my life." "Think you'll miss her?" I considered the question seriously. Would I miss the woman I'd married 12 years ago? Maybe. But that woman had been gone for a long time, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I'll miss who I thought she was, I said finally. But I won't miss who she turned out to be. The bar gradually returned to normal, conversations resuming, laughter filling the air, but I could tell that what had just happened would be talked about for years. The night Nick Foster's cheating wife tried to apologize in public and got shut down cold. I finished my drink and headed for the door. Outside, the night air was cool and clean, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jim Garrison. Elise's lawyer called. She wants to settle out of court. Looks like she's finally ready to accept reality. I typed back, "Tell him we'll consider any reasonable offer, but I'm not interested in being generous." Understood. By the way, you should know that Ethan Parker left town this afternoon, packed up his apartment and disappeared. Word is he's moving back to California to live with his parents while he figures out his next move. That was fitting. A 42-year-old man running home to mommy and daddy because he couldn't handle the consequences of his actions. I drove home through the quiet streets of my town, past the construction sites where I'd built my business, past the houses where I'd done work for neighbors and friends. This was my place, my community, and for the first time in months, I felt like I belonged here again. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Elise had moved out completely, taking only her personal belongings and leaving everything else behind. The place felt empty, but not in a bad way. More like a clean slate, ready for whatever came next. I sat in my chair and looked around the living room. Tomorrow, I'd start making changes. New furniture, new paint, maybe even some renovations. Turn this place into something that was truly mine. But tonight, I was content to sit in the quiet and think about how much my life had changed in just a few weeks. The marriage was over, the cheaters were gone, and justice had been served. It wasn't the ending I'd planned when I said I do 12 years ago, but it was the ending I deserved. And sometimes, that's enough. The phone rang once more. This time it was Big Mike. "Boss, you okay? Heard things got pretty intense at the bar tonight?" "I'm fine, Mike. Better than fine, actually." "Good. Listen, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time we expanded the business. Take on some bigger projects, hire more crew. What do you say?" "I say that sounds like exactly what I need right now. Something new to focus on." "Great. We can talk about it Monday. And boss?" "Yeah?" "You handled all this like a real professional. That woman never deserved you." After I hung up, I sat there for a while longer, thinking about the future. It was wide open now, full of possibilities I hadn't considered when I was trapped in a marriage built on lies. Elise and Ethan had thought they were so clever, so sophisticated, so much smarter than the blue-collar husband who was too stupid to see what was happening right under his nose. They were wrong about everything, and now they were paying the price for underestimating the wrong man. The game was over, and I had won.